Hey, good evening. Merry Christmas. Good evening. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy Kwanzaa and all the festivities that are happening. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Good evening. We're gonna get right to the root of this. Let me see where my guest is. There he is. He's trying to position himself. Mr. Arthur Ward, ADOS Chicago. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. Where's Marlon at?
Marlon has other plans, so you and I are gonna like rock it out tonight.
Oh, okay.
We got a lot of people watching this Christmas across these United States. How was your Christmas, Mr. Arthur?
Well, I'm a little different. I'm an atheist, so
Yeah, I know.
I don't really
I
do
wanted you to say it. I didn't want to say it. Look, I don't know many black atheists, so I wanted you to say it,
Oh,
not me.
there's plenty of them here in Chicago. You met several. You met like one, two, three, four of them at the when you came to Chicago. They didn't blurt it out, but that's what they are.
That's a whole nother conversation. Some of us had a black Christmas.
A black Chris. Well, I gave that back to the white man a long time ago.
Wow. I don't celebrate Christmas, the traditional Christmas. I don't and haven't for many years, but I do. I kind of get excited around the holidays, but I wanted to talk about, this evening, we're going to bring it all the way home. We're going to start out talking about a Black Christmas. We're going to bring this around to local and national reparations, a broader conversation. But, there's a lot of people that celebrate Christmas and they're spending money, Mr. Arthur Ward, that they don't have.
Mhm.
They're and if they don't spend it, they feel guilty that they didn't buy their kids what they wanted and what they wanted
Uh,
to buy them.
no.
There's a whole culture around Christmas and giving and spending.
Yeah.
People, it sometimes this is not a good time of the year.
Yeah, well, it's much cheaper being an atheist, I tell you. But see,
Lord, you know what? We're gonna pray for you. I'm gonna pray for you. We're gonna have to save your soul some kind of way. So I'm just gonna pray for you.
but you know what? But paradoxically, across the country, Christmas is actually the favorite holiday for atheists. But this is the reason, not because of the religious component, but because of the family getting together, food, drinking, having a good time, a time to relax and a time to rejoin with your family and your friends. That's a good thing, no matter how you label it, but I
So the
just don't.
atheists look at it like an opportunity to come together. It's a
Yeah,
gathering, as
yeah,
opposed to the Jesus story and the
yeah, no,
birth of baby Jesus and
no, we
none of
don't.
that.
No.
Lord. So all my believers out there that are watching this, let's just say a silent prayer for this atheist. I don't know too many black atheists, but here is one.
40 years.
Lord, y'all. So all my believers out there, y'all just say a prayer. It's hard. Bless his soul, Father. It's a tough time of the year, getting back to the economics of it, Mr. Arthur Ward. It's a tough time of the year for people that are wanting to do for their children and wanting to do for their families and, wanting to do for their friends and just don't have money and don't have resources. So this time of the year gets a little hard for people, particularly Black people. We're going to bring this conversation around to reparations
Mhm.
and our spending and how that all works together.
Okay.
I'm gonna let you dive in because you wrote a piece, Mr. Arthur, that I know that you're not ready to take all the way to the all the way there yet, but
Oh no, that's we
about
can talk about
reparations.
it. Yeah, we can talk about it because I mean, both all versions of it will be public anyway. So I mean, I have no problem with that, and I'm trying to sound the alarm on this okey doke that our legislators and Pan Africanists and sneaky Caribbean nonprofit organizations are trying to do to us, which will undermine our greater demand for national reparations. This local reparations thing is not a good thing at all.
Well, let's go back to the beginning because there's a lot of people that don't. We're gonna talk about reparations. A lot of there's. I'm hopeful that a lot of people that are watching tonight actually watch us on Fridays. Have been following my candidacy for the United States Senate
Okay.
with my agenda for reparations. But let's talk about reparations, the repair that needs to happen from generations of, systemic and generational damage from slavery, from Jim Crow, from black codes to redlining to yeah, yeah, everything, mass incarceration, war on drugs, the things that we still are victim of today, and why reparations is so important, Mr. Arthur Ward.
Oh well, well. The immediate reason is to close the racial wealth gap. Okay, and right
Mhm.
now that racial wealth gap is, I would say, anywhere between 25 to 75 trillion dollars. Okay, and we're talking about circumscription in terms of our ability to create business, to create commerce within the black community. A lot of times these areas were burned down, uh, redlining, which affected my parents. Okay, um, 246 years of straight up slavery, taking away, wealth and labor and creativity from black people for 246 years officially, when once this country became a country, overall 400 years since we've been in this land. So there's a lot to pay back, and then to add insult to the greatest injury ever, not allowing us to flourish after we were released to slavery on up until this day in various ways. So we have a problem here, and it needs to be addressed monetarily, with substance, and with certain considerations and protections as a special group. We've always had special laws and special discrimination, and now we need to be treated specially as a special group in the positive. So that's how I feel about
So many people. This conversation, Author, is so hard for a lot of Americans, even Black Americans, are having this. They don't understand how, and why this is important, and they don't really believe that this could even happen. Like, they
it.
don't believe
No,
that this could happen.
no, they need black people. I'm telling y'all right now. Look, how old am I now? I don't even remember.
You're 25.
I'm 64 years old. 64 years old. And I ain't got time. I really don't. Uh, Black people, one of my mentors when I was involved with the Postal Union, John Hall, and that's one thing that I never forgot. Matter of fact, this was years ago. We were at a bar in Washington, D.C., and for some reason, no, I know how. We had just watched a video with Dr. Claude Anderson. Now, Dr. Claude Anderson has been talking about reparations now for about 40 some years, a long time, okay? And I was one of those people that thought that reparations was impossible. And you know what John told me? He said, nothing is legislatively impossible. I said, really? And he said, all that's required is for constituents to make up their mind as to what they want and have the right people in the right offices to do their bidding. He said, and that's it. He said, and reparations falls up under that. He said, if we as a people really wanted reparations and we got our act together as far as like forcing our representatives to do it, he said it can get done. Yeah. And he is also a believer that you cannot get reparations done through the courts. And I said, well, why is that? He says, because you're bringing a case to people that have nothing to lose. Most judges, especially at the federal level, are in there for life. So no matter what prejudices are infecting their decisions, they have nothing to lose when they deny you. But he said, when you do it through legislation, these people have something to lose. They have their jobs to lose. He said, so he said, if it were me, I would I would try to push legislation through. I mean, I would try to push reparations through the legislative route. And so that was that conversation.
And there's this. So let's talk about what happened in Chicago. You were with ADOS Chicago. Shout out
Yes.
to ADOS Chicago. We got a big ADOS family, guys, nationally, not just Chicago. We got California, we got Texas, we got, I mean, so many, well up of like 30 states or plus. Hope,
Mhm,
it's just we're just really moving the needle with this message about reparations, closing this racial wealth gap. All the wealth, and we know this to be true, is concentrated at the top. The middle class is shrinking as a whole for all people. Is just shrinking. The bottom is getting further and further on the bottom. And
mhm,
we got to address the wealth gap in this country, but we also have to address the racial wealth gap in this country. Because
mhm,
even by giving all these, we have all these presidential candidates that are talking about, who's that talking about this universal basic income? Is that Yang or one of them that are talking about giving us like some money every month?
yeah, that was Yang.
Yeah, so that helps everybody, but you know what? There's still going to be this racial wealth gap that
Yeah,
as Black people are demanding that is going to we're going to have to close it.
yeah,
We're not going to any longer allow this country to use us to save everybody, but then not save ourselves.
exactly. But you know what? Taking it a little deeper than that, because I don't want people to think of reparations just as closing the racial wealth gap. But even though that is a very valid reason for reparations, we also have to understand this as a very deep debt. Okay. Now listen. Even if ADOS, even if African Americans did well after slavery, even if there were no redlining and so forth, that still doesn't erase the debt. Okay. Even Oprah is eligible for reparations. It has really nothing. Not it has a lot to do with closing the racial gap, but eligibility for reparations and the validity of the demand has nothing to do with net worth or how well any Black person is doing presently, at least economically. So I want to make that clear. No matter what, even if we were doing well as a group, that still doesn't erase the validity of the demand for the debt.
It is a debt owed.
It's a debt owed, period.
And it is a debt owed based on the free labor
The free labor.
built
Yes,
this country,
exactly.
and then the continuations of systems that has continued to build this country off the backs of Black.
Exactly. So I mean, don't get it twisted. Now, there is a component in terms of closing the gap, but there's all the other components that it's a straight up debt. No matter how well you're doing, particularly as a Black family, it's straight up debt, and this country owes us, and they need to get on the business of paying it.
And in 2020 is I get excited. Like, I know this next decade is going to be, I think we're going to change the course of history beginning in 2020.
Oh, you do? I hope so.
I know we are. I know we are, because it's too many of us that are committed to not just we're not just here for the short term. We're committed to the long haul of this demand.
Hmm.
And this is a new movement, but this is, I feel this, like our ancestors are literally guiding us in this process.
Well, maybe they are, but at the same time, I
Not, do
don't.
atheists believe that?
No, not really. But
Oh well, Lord, I believe it.
but I do say that we have a historic calling. Okay, when we read about what our ancestors went through, and what was extracted from them, just the weight of history itself, without any ancestor worship or spirits and all that other stuff, getting into the conversation, we're old. Okay. And the other thing too, I'm hoping that Black people don't fall into a sense of protractedness when it comes to this. In Chicago, we got a saying, Chicago ADOs, we're 5 years or less. we can get this if we focus and get this 5 years or less.
I like it. I pray that, this is 2020 will be the start of those
Yes,
5 years. And, me getting elected to United States Senate with a reparations agenda, specifically defining who we are as ADOS. So those of you that aren't, are new to the conversation about ADOS, ADOS stands for American Descendants of Slavery,
right.
system of slavery.
Right, right. We don't accept the identity of slave, but we recognize our uh, being ground through that particular institution of slavery. This particular group of people, this particular ethnicity shaped us into these descendants of slavery. We went through that, okay? And this is what distinguishes us from all other groups that were sold away from Africa.
Not just sold into slavery, but like I said, going back to the systemic and generational, you know, and atrocities, all that
Right,
happened to us,
exactly.
you know, hundreds of years. The wealth that this country has built, that we were not able to take. We weren't, they set us free, and we never got our 40 acres and a mule.
Well, no, they didn't exactly set us free.
Well,
There's a
quote
lot of,
unquote,
yeah, quote unquote.
quote unquote.
And we're still not,
According to the 13th Amendment.
yes,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
still not free to the extent of other people in this country. We're not.
yeah,
And anybody that thinks they are really, any black person that thinks we are, they're really fooling themselves.
yeah. Let's talk about Evanston.
Uh-oh.
Evanston, Illinois. Can you bring us up to speed? Tell everybody what happened in Evanston. Because the
Oh, well, they were, there's a particular lady, Robin
alderwoman, is that what y'all call them?
Alderwoman Robin Ruth Simmons,
Mhm.
who is an alderwoman in Evanston. She decided to uh, ask the legislature there to extract a marijuana tax from marijuana dispensaries in Evanston. I think
Mhm.
it's like $10 million over 10 years. And this money is to be put into the more impoverished areas of Evanston where primarily blacks live. Now, there's a problem with this.
Yes.
Uh, it's not the money is not sure because this is what they project to be extracted from these dispensaries. Okay,
Mhm.
and then the other thing that's a problem is that more than half of the black people that live in Evanston and especially live in those areas are not ADOS, and mostly Caribbeans, mostly Jamaicans and Haitians that live in these areas.
So stay there. So this policy was put in place to address the community as a whole,
Right,
with no separation of who the people are that actually need this. It's just it is a community initiative.
right.
Okay.
And that's not reparations. Matter of fact, we call it equity in Chicago. Okay, her bringing that now in a general sense, we have no problem with what she's doing as an older woman or any kind of representative. You're supposed to be bringing bread to your governing area. That's what you're supposed to do. The problem is that you're labeling this as reparations, and that's not a good thing.
And this is what you wrote. The federal government should be the only intermediary between the people and any reparational compensation.
That's right. That's right.
Federal government.
The federal
Local
government.
governments will, give me a word, will convolute, like give me a word, like they will confuse it, they will conflict. Give me a word.
Yes, they will confuse this. They will confuse the issue and
Yes.
actually eventually erode the national argument for reparations. Also, you got to understand too that that state, county, and local or municipal monies, some of that money comes from the federal government.
Mhm.
Okay, and what will happen in the long run, especially if this thing spreads nationwide, which is that's what it looks like it's trying to do.
Mhm.
It will actually erode the national argument for reparations. what they'll do, what the federal government
It
will
could
do.
try. It could possibly. We won't say it will. It could possibly.
No, it could possibly. And I'm
Yes,
good.
it
I'm
could
saying that.
dilute. She
Yeah,
she, she just gave us a
dilute.
word. Dilute. Thank you.
That's right. It will dilute or maybe even kill it. Okay, because the government will say, "Hey, we already paid you reparations. Go away." That's what will happen. And also, you got to understand too that all of these local reparations initiatives are being set up by Democrats. This is chess we're looking at. This is the long-term plan to kill reparations. And we got to understand that. ADOS or anybody that is concerned with reparations, one of the first orders of business right now is to talk to their local representatives to shut this down. There should not be a patchwork of different municipalities doing different things in different places with different eligibilities and with different outcomes. With
And
some
calling it reparations
and
when it
calling
is
it
not.
reparations, with some people otherwise eligible for national reparations being excluded, and some people otherwise ineligible for national reparations being included. And all of this confuses and will possibly mitigate the national demand.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, if a municipality or county or state wants to participate in reparations, they can. But this is the way they can do it, by providing data. What they need to be doing, if they're serious about it, is researching any companies, uh, religious organizations, educational institutions, uh, any bad laws that they had on the books previously, uh, or maybe still on the books in some cases. Okay, they need to be researching that and uploading the data to the federal government and any organizations that are directly negotiating with the federal government for reparations. There should not be any kind of monetary or otherwise expenditures given to anybody at that level under the name of reparations, period.
He says the purpose is to confuse and gain personal benefit.
Oh, you're talking about,
The legislators or anybody that's introducing this kind of policy.
that's right. The other thing too is like Pan-African organizations like NARC and NCOBRA. What they do is that they get into these processes in an advisory role, and it's a money grab for them because they get paid to do the research and provide the advice and all this other stuff. And in the case of Chicago, because they're trying to get an ordinance here done, but ADOS so far has effectively kept it in committee. It hasn't came out of committee yet, and so we're going to try to keep it there and kill it. Um, uh, they're trying to get $1 million from the city government here to do research. And what they're going to do with that $1 million is that they're going to distribute that many $1 million to certain shell nonprofits that are run by Caribbeans. So for them, it's a money grab. So all of this stuff is a scam. All of it is a hustle, and nobody should be going along with this, and it's going to kill our argument.
So this is why we must help to get me elected. Like I can't say that. I mean, we have to get to Washington. We have to take this agenda to Washington. We absolutely have no choice that we have to take this agenda to Washington. We cannot try to do this on a state level. We cannot, and I'm no state legislators, no more of these municipalities, no more of these county governments, no more of these local governmental elected officials should be initiating policy on this.
Right.
Reparations should only be handled at the federal level. And we
Federal
probably
level.
need to start a hashtag. Reparation is federal. Reparation
Oh,
is federal. That's what we need to do.
okay.
Start a hashtag. Like we got to start there, and we got to have some call to action. We got to have
Right.
some next steps to this because reparations. Let me write this down. Reparations is federal.
Right. You know, the big flag that when I figured out how they were structuring this stuff in Evanston is definitely it's geographically and chronologically limited. For example, what I'm saying here, if it can be proven that a resident that was governmentally injured that once lived in a certain area, let's say the year 1877, would that deceased individual's descendants that now live in other locations be eligible to apply for compensation? Or are the local reparations scope of reparations limited only to living individuals that are domiciled right there, right now? Actual justice claims have nothing to do with the current address of a directly injured or descended plaintiff. In a pure reparation situation, it would not matter if a descendant plaintiff is standing in the shoes of a relative that was governmentally injured in the late 1800s, and that descendant plaintiff is now living, let's say, in France as a naturalized citizen. That expatriated person would still be eligible for reparations if they can prove lineage from American slavery. That's it. All right. And these local provisions don't provide for that. So, therefore, if they don't operate that way, that's not reparations.
Mm-hmm. We just don't have time for this message to be, this movement to be diluted. I like her word. This movement to be diluted. This our message to be diluted. Reparations to be diluted. We don't have time for that. We absolutely do not. And that's why, like I say, it's imperative that we take this agenda to Washington. We have to go to Washington.
Yes. In the meantime, though, we do need to get this out to all ADOS organizations across the country, because they need to step on their local representatives like now. Because in Cobra and NARC and this mess, and they're calling this woman, Robin Ruth Simmons, to find out, how can I do this? How can I,
No. So we need to do an immediate call to action. So that's what we're going to take away from this broadcast tonight.
Okay.
Every Wednesday evening, for those of you that are just watching this now, I actually posted it for the first time on my personal Facebook page, but I do this every Wednesday evening, and I'm going to continue to do this every Wednesday to talk about the issues specific to my campaign. I do this for about 30 minutes. I've been calling it a campaign update, and this is where we really dive into the specifics of the issue. Mr. Arthur Ward is with ADOS Chicago, and we're going to take this tonight. We're going to put together a call to action, and we got a new hashtag: reparations is federal.
Reparations is federal. Okay.
Reparations is federal, so they'll know. And we're going to put together a call to action so that we can make sure that ADOS across the country, our elected officials across the country on these state levels, these municipalities, these county levels, all these levels know that reparations is federal. It's a federal initiative, and it should not be enacted in any way and call reparations on anything local. So that's our takeaway for tonight, Mr. Arthur. And thank you for writing. I mean, he has written a phenomenal piece that we're going to put together and make sure that gets out. So thank you for doing all the hard work.
Okay.
Because you did it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Tamara, and I'm glad that you exposed me to your constituency, and I appreciate their attention.
Absolutely. So again, I am Tamara Johnson Shealy, candidate for the United States Senate. If you don't know, my website is Tamara for Georgia. I host every Friday with my trusty co-host, Mr. David Slavin. He and I host every Friday where we talk all things Georgia politics, Georgia issues, ADOS. We talk and we bring in a national perspective with Mr. Egberto Willie. So we have a very robust conversation on Fridays. But moving into January, we're going to take our broadcast to Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. So 2020, we will be Saturdays and not Fridays. Let me put my website up. And Mr. Arthur Ward, ADOS Chicago. Do you guys have a website or a way that you can be contacted for those that are up in the Chicago land? I heard that's what y'all call Chicago land. Now you can't be walking away. Look, he worse than David, y'all. He's walking away from the camera in the middle of a broadcast.
I'm about to get my card for you.
Oh, I love. He's gonna get a card, y'all.
All right, so I can read it.
Me and David must be related.
Yes.
No broadcast. He walking out. He getting up.
Well, look, everybody can contact me through arthurward777 at gmail.com, and I will, anyone that contacts me that way, I will email them all of the information regarding ADOS Chicago. How about that?
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Mr. Arthur Ward, for lending us your time on this Black Christmas that you don't
Black.
celebrate. All my believers, please say a prayer for him. Please, y'all. Pray for Arthur.
Yeah, I'm going to add that to the 200, several hundred thousand people that are praying for me right now.
Somebody's prayer gonna get through. Thank you, everybody, and finish enjoying your family for the holidays. Merry Christmas to those of you that do celebrate, and look forward to seeing you guys on Friday with me and David, 11 a.m. And again, we'll be moving to Saturdays at 11 a.m. beginning in January. So see you Friday. Thank you, Arthur.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.